Hello everyone, my name is Henry, and I'm going to give you my life story. I grew up in a little small town called San Angelo, Texas. I grew up with my older sister, my grandmother. We lived in a small 3-bedroom house. And in that time I grew up, I was also, went through various school systems and things of that nature. You know, I was a very quiet kid, very introverted, very socially awkward type of person. And then as I went through high school, you know, I kind of got bullied on in the junior high and elementary spectrum, but as I got older and a little bit taller than everybody, that kind of faded away, and eventually those people kind of moved out of my life. When I graduated high school, it was 600 kids that graduated with me. And I graduated at the age of 18, and I couldn't get into the military at first, which is understandable. When I took various odd jobs, I was working at a grocery store, then I worked at a fast food joint for about a year and a half. And then I got the nerve, people, they kind of encouraged me saying, well, Henry, go back and try to join the military. This is around about the time of 1980, 1998 time frame. And around 1999, that's when it was in January, that's when I took the ASVAB again, and I actually passed. And so in February of 99 was my entry date, year. February 1999 was the day I joined the military. When I went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, which I spent 4 years, I spent 4 months there. And during the time there, there was we had like 300 trainees there, 300 and some trainees. By the time it was over, there was only 150. So, get to the gist of it, it was military's not for everybody. And with that said, I was in my first unit. My first unit was an artillery unit. It was a 2A2, which I thought I was going to stay there for a little bit longer, but unfortunately that didn't happen. I was there for 18 months. I thought I was going to re-enlist, but unfortunately I got this pursegram in the mail. They said open it, and it was like the Republic of Korea. So I went to Korea. This is around the time I was there in Korea. This is around about the time that 9/11 happened. Nobody planned that happen, but it just did. And around that time, I ended up going back to my unit, which was Fort Hood, when in a different unit, which was 1A2. I stayed in 1A2 for 3 years. I was there for 3 years. We went to Iraq, my first tour, and little did I know that, I thought that would be my last tour. So I was like, okay, good. Little did I know I wanted to have a change of scenery, so I went to Germany. I went to Germany. I was only supposed to stay there for 3 years, and I'm staying there for 7. So with that said, I did my first tour. I did my second tour, which was Iraq. And then along the lines, I got married. On top of that, I did go to get promoted. I went to school, got promoted. And then on top of that, I ended up getting married. Little did I know that kind of played out. It didn't last that long. It only lasted 5 years. I'm not going to go into much of the details with that, but unfortunately, it just didn't work out. Unfortunately, when I came back to Fort Hood, that was a different, wanted to focus more on my career. And along the lines, I ended up finding somebody else. I got married the second time. And I'm like, okay. Unfortunately, I was chapped out of the military and transitioned to the National Guard. And during that process, I was still in the military. And the marriage only lasted 7 years. Within those 7 years, she ended up leaving me. So it's like whatever, but unfortunately, I didn't see it playing out that way. And so around the time of June of 2019, I ended up getting my retirement papers and Force Korea all in the same year. Crazy how that plays out. And so what I'm trying to tell you is this, that my life took a toll at that time. And I was working a steady job and a steady paycheck. And I was working at this company for 7 years until they laid me off, which is understandable. They got tired of my attitude. And unfortunately, during that time, I learned a lot, and it was a good, stable job, but unfortunately they had to let me go. And during that time, when I got out of the military, I got my VA pay, which was, my VA, I went from 40 to 60, and all the way up to a 90. So it was a good transition, unfortunately, and unfortunately the job I have now, I've been there for about 2 years now, and it's a good paying job. I say all this because it wasn't easy in my military career. Unfortunately, I learned a lot, but I am a very successful person, successful individual. I did 20 years in the military, give or take. And also I own a home, which was very, it's hard to do. So I'm very grateful for what I have. And unfortunately, a lot of people are out there right now, and you see, I know that my successes, a lot of people don't have that, A lot of people can barely make ends meet. A lot of people don't have a home and don't have the resources I have, and I'm pretty grateful. But all in all, it wasn't a walk in the park. And I'm just telling you that because I learned that in my life, I've faced a lot of failures. And I'm going to give you one example of the failures and adversities I had to go through. My 2 years in the military, my first 2 years in the military, I went to, when I was in my first unit, the first year, I ended up going, the first 2 years, I ended up going to the promotion board. So I was a little nervous, I went to PODC first time and failed the written test. Didn't see that coming. Unfortunately, it didn't play out that way. They brought me back to that unit. Everybody looked at me like, oh, But I shut it off and I kept going at it. I came back to the promotion board the next month, proving that I can do it. And with that said, I ended up going back to PODC the second time. And unfortunately, I didn't make it. I failed the land out part of it, which is understandable. And so when I went to Korea, I still had that halo over me. I didn't get a chance to go to PODC there, but unfortunately, for the first 3 years when I went to Iraq and all that, I kind of got overlooked for promotion because of my situation and things of that nature. Unfortunately, during that time, the Iraq situation, I did go back to the Soldier Month board just to try to go back to the promotion board. It did not happen. And so at 6 years, I found myself, and at 7 years, I kind of found myself not getting promoted. And finally, my 8th year, I finally went back, got promoted, went to PODC, and actually passed it. This time it was in Germany. And so what I'm trying to tell you is I did have setbacks and adversity in that spectrum, okay? And with that said, I kept fighting. I didn't want to, my goal was to make sergeant before I leave the military. And so far I was in for 8 years and now 9 years as a sergeant. And that was my goal. And since I made sergeant, my next goal was to make staff sergeant, which unfortunately I went to ALC, which the second phase, and then I did complete the first phase online. It was very hard for me to make rank in the military. And unfortunately, back then it was a lot harder. But when 9/11 and certain things, it made it much easier. But unfortunately, I was still under the old system because back then it was very, very hard to make rank in the military. And unfortunately, a lot of times that when I was in the military, I saw a lot of people, every time I went to a school or training, there would always be people dropping out. And I would always be so discouraged to like, oh God, is that gonna be me? So I kind of like kept my head down, kept focused, and kept training because I did not want that to be me. I'm gonna give you another example. When I was in basic training, it was my first couple months in the military, and the drill sergeant came up to us and said, it was after your third week, and he would say they would have the situation they call it. He said, you don't want to be a recycle. Now, a recycle means you're not completing the task, you're not doing it right, and if you become a recycler, you got to start over back to the bottom. And I didn't want to do that. Long story short, there were a lot of recycles, I think during the 4th or 5th week in basic training. And with that said, so when we saw people's bags packed and they were on the side of the road waiting for that truck, we pretty much knew the answer. And so I had to work very, very hard to make that. That same, when it came time to the 7th, 8th or 9th week, I was still in basic training, and I was pretty ecstatic because I didn't think I would get that far. And then we had to complete another 6 weeks of basic training, which it came out to 16 weeks old, which was 4 months. And I held up my head up when I went down at graduation. We started with 350 and we ended up with less than 200. Well, let me take it back. We ended up less with 150. Okay. It was very hard, but unfortunately, I kept at it. I kept working. I kept improving the things that they tell me to do, and I made it happen. And like a lot of you, you can do the same thing. You got to keep chipping at it. You got to keep going at it. If you don't know what you need to do, you need to ask somebody. If you don't know, I need to improve on this, I need to improve on this, I need to do this, I need to do that. You have to learn to be a trainable and a very approachable person. And that's what I had to learn to do in my military career. I'll give you another example of that. When I went to PODC the first time, I had to do a written test. And unfortunately, I took that several times and I failed it. And after the third, I think it was the second attempt that I took it, it was a very hard written test, and they changed it up. It had a B and it had an A. And when I, failed the A test, unfortunately, they gave me the B test. It was a little bit different, but it was a little bit more rigid. And I failed both of them. And they said, well, you have to go back. And unfortunately, when I went back the second time, I ended up passing it because I knew what to expect. And then they got down to the land nav portion of the school, which was you had to find 4 points, and that was kind of hard. But unfortunately, I got the first time I did it, I only got 2 out of 4. The second time I did it, I only got 3 out of 4, and the first time I was 1 out of 4, and the second time was 2 out of 4. So unfortunately, they said you got to be retrained. If you don't, got to retrain, and I still failed. They said you got to go back. So I had that halo over my shoulder for about 3 to 4 years. But when I went back in 2007, after I was already a promotable status, which to make you 5, and then I left that school with a 91 overall average. And unfortunately, I didn't see that coming. But unfortunately, during that time, I learned a lot. I learned about leadership. I learned how to deal with people. And you have to be approachable, and you have to learn how to deal with people, because one of the hardest things in life to do is to deal with people. Unfortunately about that. I'm gonna give another example about me when I was in school. When I was in school, the high school wasn't perfect. We had to go to an off-campus for our freshman year, which was our 9th grade year. We had to go to a junior high, or it was an off-campus or whatever. And unfortunately, I went there, and then unfortunately, we had to go to the big campus, which housed 10 to 12. Okay, so with that said, I went there, and when I went to the high school, when I got there, there were 2,200 sophomores. And unfortunately, the school at the time, the school wasn't perfect, but unfortunately, they had a dropout rate, it was pretty high. And they gave us the paperwork for every 100 students, for every 50 students, they had 6% Hispanic, 4% Black, and 1% white. Which, with that said, that was the dropout rate. By the time I got to my junior year, there was about 900 students there. And unfortunately, I'm not saying all of them dropped out. Some relocated. Some people dropped out. Some, just didn't like school, and they took alternative schools. So, school is not for everybody. I'm not saying that what they did was wrong, but I'm just saying that school is not for everybody. And by the time I got to my junior year, which I love my junior year, it was a great year, but unfortunately, as I got down to my senior year, I was kind of stressed out. What is my next step going to be? So I was focusing on the military. And unfortunately, when I left my senior year, there was 600 students that graduated that year. And unfortunately, only 7 that I know of joined the military. And out of I think 1, including me, make 2, there's only 2 of us that did 20 years in the military. So unfortunately, the other people that joined, they only did 1 tour, and a lot of women that were there, they also said that, they left the military. They said, I had children, I wanted to raise a family. The military wasn't for me, which is understandable. And I'm not saying that raising children is wrong, but military is not for everybody. And I never saw myself doing 20 years, much less 4, but it happens. I did 20 years in the military, and I'm very proud of that. With that said, unfortunately, when I left school, I tried to, at the very end, I tried to take the ASVAB and I failed. And I'm like, which that was my second attempt at it. And then they said, well, you can't join the military. You got to come back in 6 months. So I'm like, okay. So I worked various odd jobs. I worked at a grocery store. Then I worked at a fast food joint. I went there for a year and a half until they said, are you ready to take the ASVAB again? They came and approached me. I'm like, sure. So I took the ASVAB, and unfortunately they said, I worked very hard, I had to study, and they said, you passed. Okay. And unfortunately, that was when I joined. Now, life hasn't been easier after that, because ever since I joined the military, it's been very, very competitive. And very competitive is meaning that you had to stay on top of your game. Every school that you go to, everything, you had to pay attention because you were at the cutting block. And that's what I've learned in my life. And unfortunately, learning those things in life, I learned how to deal. When I went to school, I had to learn what a leader was. And being a leader means that you have to see the good and the bad in everybody. You have to know who is doing right. You guys know what's right, you gotta know what's wrong. And you got to follow protocols, you got to have ethics and values. And sometimes we learn that as children, but also the military, what they instill you, the values, the ethics, and morals. And unfortunately, when I learned that, I took that into the workforce. And I learned a lot when I got out the military, because unfortunately, when I was in the military, I was a very rich person. I was a clear-cut, black and white, yes or no type of person. But unfortunately, when you act like that in the military, you can get away with that. But unfortunately, when you leave the military, it doesn't always add up. And unfortunately, in the military, what I had to learn is that it's clear-cut, black and white, no wiggle room. But when you leave the military and go to the corporate side and you have to realize that in the military, they hold you to a contract. And the civilian spectrum, well, they could easily let you, they can easily leave and go to a different job. And that's reality. And unfortunately, I learned that in my life. And unfortunately, I've seen a lot of people, they go from various different jobs, but what they do is what they do. Some people perform well, some people just like they don't want to deal with this type of work. And I'm a person that, good or bad, I want to make the best of it. That's what type of person I am. That's why I've lasted for the military. That's why I've lasted in several jobs, because I see the good. I see, I want to, if I finish a task, if I start a task, I want to finish it. Which leads me to my next thing I want to say. When I was in the corporate world and working in the work field, I noticed that a lot of people don't save money. They're very broke. And I learned one thing in my life. There's the rich, there's the poor, and there's the middle class. And let me say that again. There's the broke, the middle class, and the poor. And with that said, I learned a lot about that. You see, that's a perspective. Let me give you an example about poor people. Poor people / broke people, they do two things. They talk down about the people at the top, and then once they get that money, they constantly spend it and it's gone in 2 days. That's the broke mentality. And I've seen some people, as soon as they get a paycheck, they just spend it and spend it and spend it until the money's gone. And they have nothing to show for it. And that's understandable, but that's just the way they get. And some people say, well, Henry, you're not gonna take the money with you. But it's understandable. I get it. But you have to have some money set aside just in case something goes wrong. But people don't think like that. They always say, I'm broke. And then you give them money and guess what? They're still broke. They're gonna be broke today, tomorrow, and the next time you see them. Because that's just their mentality. They constantly complain about the people at the top. And they don't want to become the people at the top. And that's what I learned. So that's kind of a negative energy, and I have to get away from that in that light. Which leads me to the next people, which is the middle class. Now the middle class are a little bit similar, but they're a little bit different. They also live within their means. They also have a car payment, a house, and they also set a little bit of money aside for a rainy day and stuff like that. They don't want to get too much money or have less money. They want to stay in the middle. You know what I'm saying? They just stay in the middle. They want to stay within their means and don't want to branch out and make more money or invest their money and things of that nature. They don't want to pay that much taxes. They just want to stay in the middle. And that's how some people are. That's just the nature of the beast. Now, the rich are a little bit different. The rich are willing to take the risk. They're willing to spend the money, save the money, and invest the money. That's the biggest thing about being rich. They're out there taking the risk, putting themselves out there, getting that business loan, and doing the things that are necessary. They use debt as an asset, that's why most rich people. I'm gonna give you an example. A poor person, as soon as they get their money, they pay the rent, they do this and they do that, and they have the money left over. A rich person takes that rent money and invests it into and makes a cash flow. That's what they do. Rich people have money coming in. Poor people, as soon as they have money, they just take it out and just give it to, oh yeah, I got to pay the rent and everything else, and then they're broke again. That's the mindset of a poor person. A rich person goes out and he makes it happen. He invests in property. He invests in business, which is a lot of things that create cash flow. That's what I've learned about the rich and the poor. Now, I'm going to give you a story about a woman. I met this woman, and it breaks my heart when she was 65 years old, and it broke my heart when I talk about this, because she was broke down crying. She didn't have no money. She was 65 years old, and she didn't have any money to her name, and she was barely working part-time at Walmart. And she told me this crazy story, and I'll tell you a story about her, and I hope that if you are listening out there, they're hoping that you won't go down that same path. There is a woman, she was married to a soldier. She was married very young. They started having children around their teens or 20s, or whatever the case may be. She was 20 years old, and she started having kids, and she was with a soldier, and he had been in the military for 20 years, and they had 5 children together. And with that said, when she raised those 5 children, he did 20 years in the military, whatever the case may be, and during that whole time, she did not work for those 20 years. So she had no Social Security saved up, no nothing. And that's a sad story. But what I'm trying to tell you is this, is that since she did not work, it kind of hurt her in the workforce. When she raised her last child and had him graduate and everything, she started putting herself back out there in the workplace. And it did not work because she had 0 work experience. The only thing that she had was volunteering at babysitting, which was still taking a chance. So the main reason why she did not get a job or a full-time job, because she had no work experience. And that hurt her in her life. And with that said, she goes, well, I'm gonna go back to college and maybe I'll get a job, or maybe get a better job. Little did she know, she spent 5 years getting that college degree, and once again, she was not working. So therefore, she did not get the job because she had about 25 years of not working. So what I'm trying to tell you is this: even though the woman did not work, and when she came to retirement age, she started getting back into the workforce at 45, and now she's back at 65, and she's been working at Walmart for the last 15, 20 years, and she has nothing to show for it, and she lives with her son. Now, what I'm trying to tell you is this: you have to learn to chase your dreams. Now, I know when you have setbacks like that, you got to realize that just because you have children or just because you have a significant other, don't not chase your dream. Yes, you're going to have children, but they're going to be a part of your life. Now, I know that has nothing to do with me, but I'm just saying that that's what I had to go through. That's what derails a lot of people's dreams, is that people, as soon as they have children, they make them the main focus of their lives, and they don't go and chase their dreams, and they spend all these years having the children be the priority, and they don't have nothing to show for it. And then that's the thing about social groups and sociology. That's what happens. The moment you have a significant other, the moment you have children, you tend to put all your focus on them, and you forget about your dreams. And unfortunately, when they have children, the process repeats itself. Don't let that happen. Yes, you're going to have children, but follow your dreams. That's the biggest thing that you need to do. Follow your dreams, because nobody's going to follow it for you. Make your money, because nobody's going to make it for you. If you want to be successful in this life, you have to put yourself first. Don't put yes, you have to put your children, take care of their needs, but also if you have a vision, if you have a goal, you have to chase it. And the last thing I said to that woman, I said, what did you want to be when you grew up? She said, I wanted to be a nurse, but I never had the chance. And unfortunately, and because she's too old now and she will never be able to be a nurse because her career got derailed, it will never happen. So what I'm trying to tell you is this: if you have a goal out there to become a nurse, a coach, a doctor, a lawyer, or whatever it is, follow that dream. Because if you don't, you're gonna be wishing that you had. But if you have, if the time that you have, if it's scary to jump, that is the moment you need to jump. Your parachute might not open at first. Yes, you might get cut up. Yeah, you might get skinned up. But you're gonna jump. You're gonna put forth an effort. You're gonna follow your dreams. And that's what I had to do in my life. I didn't expect to join the military, but I did. And it opened up so many opportunities. And now I'm here today and I'm following my dreams of being a motivational speaker, to be a successful person, and to tell you that you don't have to be a failure. Everybody has failures. Everybody has setbacks. But how you deal with them, even in my life, when I constantly failed, I kept getting back up. And I kept pushing through. Yes, they could have kicked me out. Yes, I could have listened to those people and say, oh, you're going to fail, you might as well quit. I could have listened to them, but I chose not to. In order to be successful, you got to stop listening to all the noise and focus on the goal. Now, when you have goals in your life, when you set those goals, there's going to be a few things that you have to do. You're going to have barriers. Now, you can go through the barriers and you can go around the barriers, but you're going to have barriers in this life. And how you deal with them is going to define who you are. Be that successful person that puts their goals first. So what I'm telling you is this: everybody has a goal in life. And the thing is, when most high school students, 75% of high school graduates do not know what they're going to do when they leave high school. That is true. About 50 to 60% of high school graduates still live with their parents. And about also 60% of them as well don't know what they're going to do. They're lost out there. They don't have the work experience. But the thing is, out of that 75%, I'll learn one thing. You either, half of them are either going to love what they do, or they're going to hate what they do. But when you get 30 or 40 or whatever the case may be, and you want to be established. You got to take what you give. If you want to be a police officer or get into law enforcement, if that's the job that you do and it pays good, then make the best of it. Everybody doesn't plan to be in the position. Some people, they're recommended and things of that nature. But a lot of people in high school do not plan to be in the job that they are in now. But it just happens. Some people work for the state. Some people will work in the medical field. Some people work as a teacher. The thing is, fulfill your calling. If you're called to be a teacher, be a teacher. If you're called to be a nurse, be a nurse. That's the thing. If you don't fulfill a calling, then you will lose out. If you have dreams, write them down and manifest it. If you want to be a doctor, write it down. If you want to lose weight, write it down. If you want to run a marathon, write it down. But have realistic goals in your life. Don't just say, well, I want to make $1 million and don't have no money to make, don't have a plan. Because anybody can say, I want to make $1 million, but it's not going to happen. Have clear plans. If you don't have clear plans, you will never be successful in this life. It starts small. Save money. And if you don't save money, you won't have money. If you don't prepare for the future, you won't have a future. And you will be just like that woman who didn't have anything, didn't have no money saved up, didn't work, didn't have no social security. And I'm not trying to talk down about the woman. Nobody plans to fail, but people fail to plan. That's life. In order to be successful, you have to have goals and you have to have a plan. If you don't have a plan, then you will not make it. And you have to save money. If you don't save money, you won't have money. And know when to invest money. And this is Henry Gates.